Welcome back and thank you for joining us. My name is Michael Williams and this is the Power Coach Approach. Today's training session will be on self-esteem and self-worth. Self-esteem and self-worth. Well, someone says, well, I thought that this was about how to speak better. Exactly. Self-esteem and self-worth have a direct impact on how well you speak. And so let's talk about how that is and why that is. But first, let's just provide a brief definition of self-esteem and self-worth. So self-esteem is essentially how you feel about yourself. It's your reputation with yourself. It's what you believe about yourself as well, but it's more so how you feel about yourself. Your self-worth is how you feel about your value. That is, do you believe, do you feel like you have something of value to give to others? Do you feel like you have something of value to give to others? Do you feel like your skills or your talents or your abilities or something about your personality, that is who you are, do you feel like that's something that someone else would value? Okay, do you feel like you're a person of value? Just being who you are, even if you were not able to do much of anything, but just your personality and who you are, do you feel like that is something of value? So when we think about self-worth and self-esteem, then we ask the question, how does this impact my speech? How does this impact my speech? And how is this impacted by my speech? So there's something called performance-based self-esteem, performance-based self-esteem. And essentially what that is it is how you feel about yourself based on how you perform. So in the area of speaking, if you speak well, if you speak smoothly, if you speak fluently, then you feel good about yourself, right? And when you don't speak well and you don't speak fluently, then you feel bad about yourself, okay? Now, the inverse of this is also true, that in fact, how you feel impacts how well you speak, and how well you speak impacts how you feel about yourself. So if I feel good about myself, that is, if my self-esteem is up, my self-worth is up, independent of how I speak, but if I just feel good about myself, then chances are I'm probably going to speak better, right? And I'll talk to you a little bit more about exactly how this works, because someone says, that's not necessarily true. I mean, I feel good about myself and I still stutter. And that may be very true, but I just want to show you the connection between these two. So if I feel good about myself, right, then my self-esteem is going to be higher and I'm going to feel like I have greater self-worth, and I'm going to be calmer and I'm going to be more confident, which we'll talk about in the next section, because these things all relate. You know, we're just one person and all these things aren't really separated out, but we are separating them out so we can talk about them, but they're all interrelated. So when I feel good about myself, right, then I'm often able to speak better. And then when I speak better, I feel good about myself. And so it's a cycle that reinforces itself. So someone says then, well then how can I make myself feel better? Because I'm in this cycle where I try to feel good about myself, but then I mess up in an interview, or I'm not able to speak in a presentation, or I'm not able to talk to strangers. And so then my self-esteem starts to come down, all right? Well, one of the things that we'll be looking at later, but I'm just going to share this with you a little bit, and it's something that we've talked about in the DAM strategy, and that is, and this is something that's very simple, believe it or not, but it works, and that is the power of affirmations, the 3P formula, which again I explained in the DAM formula, and I'll talk about it again when we get to the TAP approach, T-A-P, and we talked about that in the introduction, so I won't go into it again, but you will be getting to that as you follow along in these trainings. So how do we increase, or how do you jack up your self-esteem? Well, we'll talk about it briefly right now. One of the easiest ways that you can do it is by giving yourself an injection of affirmations each day, all day long. I'm not just saying this just to share some kind of theory with you, but what I used to do as I was working through this process myself years ago is just tell myself, I like myself. I love myself. Because there were times when my self-esteem would be low because I wasn't able to communicate as well as I wanted to. So I would have to jack up my self-esteem, which made me feel a little better, which helped my speech. Now, it didn't all of a sudden, I didn't start saying affirmations and bam, I'm fluent, but it helped. It helped. And that's what we're doing. This is incremental. You're helping just a little bit. And what you'll see, and we'll talk about the principle of accumulation, that every little bit you do accumulates until all of a sudden you have this momentum going and you start to see these huge gains. But they have to accumulate and they have to start small. And one of the small things that you can do that can have a big impact, short term and long term, is tell yourself, I like myself. I love myself. I like myself. And don't just say, I like myself, I like myself, I like myself, right? Because you're not even going to believe that, right? But if you say, I like myself, I love myself, I like myself, then you're going to start to actually feel it. Hey, I really do like myself. Regardless of the fact that I stutter sometimes, or I may stutter now, but I'm not going to stutter in the future, right? Now, you don't want to say all that, but you'll say, I like myself, I like myself, I love myself. Now, you don't want to walk around saying that out loud because people are going to think you're arrogant, conceited, and crazy. But you do want to say it aloud when you're by yourself. Why? Because number one, you're saying it, you're thinking it, you're saying it, and what else? And you're hearing it. So see, you got those three things going. You're thinking it, you're saying it, and you're hearing it, right? So it's in this cycle and it's reinforcing itself, and you're feeling it. When you say, I like myself, and not, I like myself. When you put some emotion in it, and we'll talk about emotionalization a little later in the program, got a lot of good stuff for you. And all this stuff that I've used, okay, and stuff that I use now to increase or to expand or to develop myself in other areas, maybe just not in speaking, but I still use this, and so do many other people in sports, in sports performance, in public speaking, and in a lot of other areas. So this works. This works. So by telling yourself that, and by emotionalizing that, putting some emotion and feeling to it, you can begin to jack up yourself. In fact, some people, when they do it, they instantly feel good. And then you walk out and you mess up, and then you do it again. I like myself. Despite that, I like myself, I love myself. And you keep doing that until you start to believe it. So regardless of how many times you may stutter or mess up, you still like yourself. And what's going to start to happen as you work the rest of the program, the other stuff, and your self-esteem stays up, and it starts to impact your performance. Remember, performance-based self-esteem. Your self-esteem stays up, it impacts your performance. And then, as you slowly see yourself, even if you just speak well one time, hey, I spoke well then, look at that. Then you start to feel good about yourself, and your performance impacts your self-esteem, and then your self-esteem impacts your performance, and before you know it, you don't even have to say that anymore, because you walk around just feeling good about yourself. Not arrogant, but just feeling good about who you are and your performance. Now, what can happen is sometimes we can go through these cycles and we can say something like, oh, well, I didn't do so well today. In fact, I sucked. And then you can say, well, I feel terrible. I hope I don't mess up again, but I probably will mess up. And then you start to say, if you do mess up, you say, oh, I messed up again. See, I knew I was going to mess up. And then that whole cycle goes back. You start thinking, oh man, I messed up again. Look at that. Oh, I'm probably going to mess up the next time as well. I hope I don't. Oh, I messed up. See, and then you go through that cycle, and that again drags down yourself. So what you have to do is to keep your self-esteem jacked up. And then when you mess up, just keep going. I still mess up. Every now and then I'll get into a little something, and I will stop, or I'll pause and something won't come up, and I'll just keep right on going. I'll even smile at myself, and I'll just keep right going. I'll keep right on going. And so I no longer think of myself as a stutterer, and I maintain a high level of self-esteem, and my performance, 98% of the time, 99% of the time is great, but there's those 1 or 2% where Yeah, I mess up, but no more than any normal person. Normal people, and when I say normal people, I mean people who don't think of themselves as stutterers, people who stutter themselves when they say they're stuttering, but they don't think of it as stuttering. And so people who stutter tend to think of themselves as not being normal, right? At least in that area. And so what we do is we start thinking, oh, I stuttered, and we zoom in and focus on that stuttering, and we expand it, and it becomes big. Why? And then we get in that cycle, and we continue to do that. In fact, I'll share a little secret with you. In doing this program, starting back from before June, and creating this program, I had to start thinking about stuttering. And I had to go back and start thinking about when I stuttered. And when I stutter now, I had to start thinking about that and examining it and looking at it. And unfortunately, what I found myself doing is actually being more conscious of stuttering, and stuttering a little more than what I had been for many years. But I said, you know what? It's worth it. It's worth it for me to re-examine that. And I've had to start telling myself, I'm an excellent speaker. I'm a great speaker. Right? I like myself. I'm a great speaker. Not as much as I used to. Just every now and then, because my mind now is focused on stuttering. It's focused on it so that I can extract the information, and so that I can identify and think about how it felt, and what is it that's happening when I'm doing it, or when I used to do it. Okay? And so I've had to get back into it again, and it's impacted me in that way. But it's worth it, because if I can help one person or 10 people or 1,000 people, then once again, it's all worth it. So I just wanted to share that with you, because thinking about stuttering will cause you to probably stutter, right? And so that's the reason that in this program, I don't want you really to think about stuttering. I want you to think about fluent speaking. I want you to think about being an excellent speaker, a great speaker. And as we go throughout the program, we'll talk about it, because all of that impacts how you feel about yourself and your value. So I hope that this has been helpful. And just a recap, your self-esteem and your value, that's how you value yourself and your performance, what you're able to do, impacts your performance. It impacts how well you speak. And how well you speak impacts how you feel about yourself. So the one thing, if you don't walk away with anything else, that I want you to get, is that you can jack up how you feel about yourself by using affirmations, using that 3P formula. I like myself, I love myself. You can increase your self-esteem, which will positively, and maybe incrementally, but positively impact your performance. Okay? And then as your performance improves, so will your self-esteem. All right? So as you work through the rest of the program, and you do the practice and the modeling and all that stuff, and as you look at every time you do well, so your performance is getting better, then that also makes you feel better about yourself, and it says, hey, I am going to be able to contribute even more value, because you have a great deal of value now, and many of you are doctors and lawyers and doing all kinds of things, and maybe you're not doing anything, but you still have great value, see, and you also have great potential. So as you're able to perform better, then you're also going to feel better about yourself and your value. So hopefully that makes sense. Once again, this is Michael Williams. Thanks for visiting with us at the Power Coach Approach. And this session has been on self-esteem and self-worth. So I'll see you in the next session, where I believe we're going to be talking about self-confidence and courage.